Councillor Bianco, I'm sure you'd like to please continue with left off, and may I please remind anybody else that I may have to clear that part of the council chamber should we have any other problems. So, Councillor Bianco, please continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That interruption was clearly not made by geography graduates, as they should have been in Harrow, Ealing or Hounslow, just to mention three. They'd have learned something about cuts and closures if they'd gone to there. Coming here was frankly a waste of their time. I find also, I have to say, that the applause that they received from the other side here speaks volumes for their regard for democracy and its institutions. Mr. Mayor, I'm standing here once again to deliver this administration's budget for the forthcoming... Oh no, I won't go right back to the beginning.
You will if you like.
I'll count if anybody feels they've missed out on anything. I'll just recap slightly. What I was saying was that despite the significant savings required, the important message to take home to your residents, and I'll repeat this because some of it did get drowned out, the important message to take home is that this council is still fully functioning and delivering all the services that our residents have come to expect. And these include the weekly waste collections, the 17 libraries full of books and computers, the youth service, the upkeep of our parks and open spaces, including the 42 green flags. And I should add there that we are in Britain in bloom again this year. There is also Hillingdon in bloom, which will be coming forth later in the year for our residents to take part in, and the autumn show, all going ahead as per previous. The 42 green flag sites, our leisure facilities, our voluntary sector grants, our Chrysalis programme, £1 million again, our cemeteries and crematorium, and all these facilities much valued by our residents, and they all continue to function just as they always have. No reduced services, no reduced hours. We aren't stopping sweeping the leaves in our parks or switching to fortnightly or even monthly collections of waste. Now, to put all this into some context, Mr. Mayor, tonight I'll be moving a general fund budget of some 220 million. And this was the saving target I just mentioned, I mentioned a bit earlier, of 15.5 million, into some proportion. But it is a 7% reduction, which is not something that is easily digested. And when compared to other organisations, and particularly the boroughs I've been talking about, it's a far larger savings requirement than many could handle. And as already stated, comes on top of many previous years of savings in the past that we have delivered. This administration's history of delivering these savings and still providing all the services we do shows that we are a team to be trusted, and one I feel sure our residents will endorse when they next get the opportunity. Part of the way we are able to manage our finances is with the continuing use of the Risk and Development Contingency Fund, which continues to provide a buffer against uncertain or unexpected budget pressures. And this year, we will increase that contingency to over 19 million. This fund is, in essence, our central reserve, and its existence means that we do not need individual department contingencies, allowing us to spend money both where it is needed and, more importantly, on the projects and in the areas that we know our residents will expect. So, not satisfied with not cutting anything and not closing anything and not putting up council tax, what else are we planning? Well, as usual, we are supporting a wide range of projects to enhance our borough. Examples in green spaces, my sphere of influence, includes a new skate park in the north of the borough, enhancements to playgrounds in our parks, new landscaping in the Norman Leddy Memorial Gardens in Hayes, more plant displays and hanging baskets throughout the borough at the request of many of our residents. And in addition, we will be seeking lottery funding to secure and enhance Cranford Park and its historic buildings and landscapes. And we will be putting money, and we will also be putting money into improving our allotments to encourage participation in Grow Your Own in 2017. Doesn't quite rhyme, but apparently that's the phrase. Examples in other areas of the council will include the sale of 20 shared ownership flats in Packetboat House, usually to help our residents get their first foot on the housing ladder. We will invest money into the development of a new Battle of Britain bunker education and visitor centre just across the road. We have put aside £1 million, over £1 million, into our Priority Growth Fund to support further projects, including £200,000 requiring exhibits for the new visitor centre, and surprisingly £200,000 for additional support of children's centres and early years centres, this rather flying in the face of the accusations made opposite that we were stripping these centres to save money. A further £100,000 to support youth provision, £140,000 to deal with any potential traveller incursions, and £40,000 to support extra staff in the Members' Inquiry Service. And taking into account all these priority growth areas, there is a further sum of £254,000 unallocated at this time to be invested when the right projects come forward during the course of the year. Mr. Mayor, our capital programme and budget continues apace alongside our revenue budget, with the central major project once again focusing on our schools expansion programme. This programme has and will deliver some 44 forms of entry between its start in 2010 and completion in 2022, and will involve the investment by this borough of some £273 million across primary and secondary sectors. Whilst this is a huge sum, I am pleased to report that there has been a small decrease in the growth forecasts of pupil numbers, which some of you will have noticed in my announcement. The saving in terms of extra forms of entry is 6, down from a previous estimate of 50, and the commensurate cash savings are likely to be in the order of 38 million. The first 3 phases of this programme are now complete. Phase 4 is currently underway at a cost of £27.4 million, and this programme will continue until we are sure that every school-aged child has a proper place in a proper school in Hillingdon. Beyond this, we will invest more than £2 million in Hayes Town Centre improvements. Hayes, from the south of the borough. £650,000 to rebuild the listed gatehouse at Uxbridge Cemetery. £300,000 further investment in Bowls Club refurbishments. £800,000 at the Hillingdon Sports and Leisure Centre. £300,000 for the Ruislip Railway Society to enable them to replace their main workshop. It's a much admired and used attraction in the north of the borough and by all those who visit Ruislip Lido. We will see the beginning of our investment in the new St Andrews Museum project with the investment of just over £1 million and a further £1 million into the beginnings of the new St Andrews Theatre project. We will be continuing our programme announced last year, very important, of replacing all our streetlights by investing £4.2 million in the rolling programme this year, changing all our streetlights to LEDs and thus saving considerable amount of money in electricity costs. It will be a self-financing project in a very short period of time. The total capital programme this year will amount to £65 million. And all this is before we talk about the housing revenue account and the housing revenue account capital programme, which also forms part of this budget setting tonight. Our housing estate and the capital investments we will continue to make there, a capital programme of some £71 million this year, will allow us to continue improving our stock, replacing lifts, replacing boilers, and of course building new homes like the 88 Underwear, Grassy Meadows and Parkview, designed to provide supported extra care places. All these and more, such as the continuing programme to install burglar alarms in the homes of the over 65s free of charge, are possible because of the sound financial position this council is in and will remain in over the coming years. Mr. Mayor, if I were to suggest to you that this has all been easy and that putting together this budget hasn't taken considerable time, effort and ingenuity, I would be misleading you. As in each previous year, an enormous amount of work has gone into this document from both officers in the finance team under the director and most importantly the leader of the council with his encyclopedic understanding of the council's finances. To all involved, we owe a vote of thanks. More work will come over the course of this year to deliver this budget. But standing here tonight, may I remind you all that this is a robust piece of work from a competent Conservative administration that you can tell your residents will deliver once again the services and programmes that our residents rely on and have come to expect from us. Mr. Mayor, We have delivered, we are delivering, and we will deliver in the year ahead. And on the basis, I would direct you to the recommendations set out on the order paper, numbers 1 to 17, which I formally move and recommend to the Council. Thank you.
Is that second?
Mr. Mayor, I second and reserve my right.
Thank you, much. Councillor Dillon, you indicated?
No.
Seems like the wrong time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I take the opportunity to thank officers for their assistance in drafting the amendment and for their hard work over the course of the year in creating the budget for 2017-18. Thanks also to my colleagues in the Labour Group for their input over the last few months. Mr. Mayor, we have a budget before us created, I'm sure, with great difficulties given the pressures that this Council and others face from Conservative funding cuts. The Conservative central government over the years has poured blame on the previous administration and vowed to solve the UK debt and lead us all to salvation. Look at us now, 6 years in. The deficit is higher than it was ever before. Services across the country are struggling. Councils face huge cuts to funding year on year, and our youngsters face a lifetime of debt, and the general public are now so disillusioned with the world of politics that Nigel Farage is even seen as credible. Austerity was the buzzword, a path that the previous Chancellor was hell-bent on pursuing. Did he reduce the debt? No, he did not. He actually made it worse. Now with a new Conservative Prime Minister, a new Chancellor, one would have expected some optimism for a new course of direction, seeing the other way was not bearing the fruits it should have. Yet they have buried their heads in the sand and continued on the course of austerity that is bringing misery upon us all. Now I know you will argue that we have growth in the economy. Employment figures are improving, tax revenues were even 0.6 billion better this year than last year. What a wonderful story this could be, and how deluded I would be if I believed it. In truth, the debt has soared under this government to 1.6 trillion. Growth is once again driven by consumer debt on credit cards or property prices. The employment figures are generally based upon zero-hour contracts or part-time positions, and the tax revenue through the Treasury has been collected by them being more efficient. The crux of the matter is that austerity has not brought about a month-on-month, year-on-year increase in tax revenue to reduce increasing Conservative deficit or fund services centrally, or even to fund those devolved to local government. It's unfathomable to think that they cannot see this, surely pursuing a policy for so long that does not realise its theory would bring about some change. It's those less fortunate, those not in business, those not relying on large handouts from corporations, those that are like us, normal residents of Hillingdon that are suffering. They suffer because councils up and down the country are facing a financial crisis. We acknowledge that we are in an enviable position compared to other councils, and that savings have to be made when funding is reduced in such a drastic manner year on year and grants become scarce. You will be aware that we hear the good news story each year, but the budget this year we would have thought would be better described as thank God we just about got there. London Borough of Hillingdon has made cuts over previous years, and there are plenty in this budget. Efficiencies have also been sought, and they appear in this budget, and we commend officers for those. I'm sure we will have to find many more over the next few years, and possibly beyond 2020, as the Conservative government seems hell-bent on pursuing a failing austerity project, applying the odd band-aid here and there when they pander to the press, rather than adopting a long-term strategy that actually works. We acknowledge the inflationary pressures on the sectors within the budget are unforeseeable or too difficult to determine at this current time. And this element makes delivering the budget even more difficult. I'll take a glass of water. Mr. Mayor, rationalisation of a business facing a reduction in revenue cannot be argued. It's a prudent course to take initially, as it's so often the easiest course to take. However, there comes a time when those cuts begin to take a toll on the business. We feel that we are now on a precipice. The cuts made to services within the borough are tipping us over the edge. It's apparent now in many sectors of the service we provide. Residents are telling us they see the effects. Slow responses in questions to their queries, petitions put forward to council, processing of planning applications, enforcement action, all services that are essential to the well-being of our community. such as waste management, antisocial behaviour and road landlords. And that's just the day-to-day service provision. We're also seeing cuts to services and broken promises. The youth centres, promised in the Conservative manifesto, which is on page 6, bullet point 4, have now stalled. Children's centres, we hear, may or may not be saved, but they are directly threatened with savings. We are asked to believe this won't affect the service provision. The 189,000 still remains in your budget, but those who rely on the service day to day are not convinced by the proposed restructuring, which they say will take away their local connection and their support. I wonder how many councillors, Conservative councillors, feel the same as we do. Then there is the social care element, at a crisis point nationally in Hillingdon, as we may or may not know, the settlement from government was cut to the tune of £1 million. It seems that the policy of the administration here was to take it off social care and rename it as a zero-based review. We happen to agree that central government should take the responsibility for the crisis, as they have failed to address the dire need for far too long, and will be forced to apply yet another sticky plaster. Councillor Puddifoot's recent appearance on the television calling for central government to fund the cut was most welcome and demonstrates that staunch Conservatives are even at odds with their government. One would like to think that a cut here of £1 million was not some kind of internal spat of greater magnitude than that of Theresa May's leather trousers. Thank you. I know my fellow councillors on the correct side of the chamber will have comments on the cuts outlined. Council tax revenue has been encouraging this year. Receipts are up due to a greater number of homes within the Band D sector being built. But it might be worth mentioning at this point that a majority of those are affordable housing, but quite the reverse. Business rates have moderately seen an increase, and our future income seems to crucially lie on this source of revenue, as the government... Thank you. Allow me to pause, thanks. Crucially to lie on this source of revenue as the government settlements stands to fall year on year and glance dry up. However, as has been mentioned in this report, in the Cabinet report, this is not certain source of income, and even more uncertain as we hear the Chancellor may now listen to businesses within London about proposed increases. We as a council, for the sake of future finances and our residents, need to seriously explore avenues of income generation, and not just through property selling. Councils throughout the country have begun programmes or are seriously looking at initiatives which will add to the revenue total. We are led to believe the London Borough of Hillingdon has yet to explore this avenue, and there may be some reluctance in this area. Any sound financial business model at some point has to turn a corner from mere cost cutting to try to at least, and I'm not seeing a motivation for it currently, but I sincerely hope it's being explored. Certainly as a Labour group, we've begun to explore initiatives, and we can discuss these over the coming period. After all, we are here to serve the residents of Hillingdon. On to the Labour group's proposed friendly amendments. It is proposed that 2 full-time posts be implemented to tackle increased antisocial behaviour within the borough, particularly apparent in the south. Residents and councillors are seeing and reporting this, and action needs to be taken quicker. The crucial element of this need surrounds outbuildings and illegal builds to homes. Officers have had success over the year in cracking down on this area, but we are only scratching the surface. Whilst it's almost income generating, the deterrent needs to be hammered home. It's an area where we need to be proactive and enforce. It's only to slow down in these operations, if only to slow down these operations. Hence we recommend the employment of 2 officers to combat that, to create the impact required. These positions will of course become self-financing through efficiencies in processing of backlogs and proactive enforcement. We also propose the abolition of child burial charges for residents. At the time of extreme bereavement, we should be supporting our families during this obviously difficult period. Burial changes are something that they should not be having to worry about. The final amendment calls for the removal of the Children's Centre saving for the reasons I've already mentioned, and I'm sure will be discussed shortly. These are our proposals for an amendment. Not too contentious, and I'm looking forward to these being welcomed by the administration. Or am I just kidding myself that common sense can prevail? I would like to move the Labour Group's amendments as printed on the order paper to be funded by a reduction in general contingency and allocated priority growth. I so move. Thank you.
the proposed amendment to the general fund revenue budget seconded?
Mr. Mayor, I second the amendment and reserve my right.
Just for clarification of members and all those observing, we are now discussing the amendment which is printed on pages 7 and 8 of the order paper. Any members who previously indicated to speak on the main motion, actually I think that was only you, Councillor Lewis, would need to indicate again if you wish to speak on the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I wonder whether the officers can give legal advice, because I just believe that what's been moved as an amendment is actually illegal and inaccurate, because it refers to the years 2016-2017, and they're of course about to end in 6 weeks' time. So I do believe the Labour Party need to move an amendment to their amendment if they're actually talking about the year 2017 to 2018. And I would put it to everyone in this chamber, if that's their best effort, and they can't even get the year right, then why should we even listen? Why should we take a lecture from the Labour Party in Hillingdon, who have spent months and months and months trying to come up with an amendment, and they can't even get the years right? But what's more than that, Mr. Mayor, this is the same Labour Party in Hillingdon who said, you can't change the libraries a few years ago, all our libraries will come to an end if you try to change it. We now have the most successful libraries of probably across the whole of the country. This is the same Labour Party in Hillingdon that told us, if you try to review the music service in Hillingdon, it will collapse. We'll never have our children doing music tuition again. What do? We reviewed it, and we have one of the best music tuition services in the country. Why should we listen to the Labour Party when they moan and groan about austerity, when it was the Labour Party that created the situation in the first place? Your nice Mr. Blair, I know you love him, but it was your nice Mr. Blair, compounded by that golden brown, that actually created the crisis that we have been trying to get through ever since. And don't come here telling us that we should do this and that when you have no idea, and you've objected every time to a review of how we go about doing the business. How do you really think we have saved over 100 million in 7 years without actually dismantling all the services? And, well, you say there's cuts. You say there's cuts. I would challenge you right now, when we have the election next May, we are going to win quite easily, because our residents recognise that in Hillingdon, not only have we frozen their council tax, but we have provided the core services that a local authority should be providing. We've done it in a way which has improved lots of services, as per the libraries and the music tuition, and again you say they're in denial. This is the Labour Party in Hillingdon that is absolutely in denial as to what has happened in this borough since we took control properly and started looking at these budgets line by line and going through every area. This amendment is a joke. This Labour group is a joke.
I hope I've got it in the right order now. Councillor Sweeting.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make a point of information or correction on this? If we look at this amendment, it is printed as a 2017/18. I'm afraid there has been a typo in 1, but in 2 it does refer to the budget on the 16th of February 2017. So for clarity, I would like to take the opportunity of correcting that. Thank you.
I think it could be reasonable to accept there's a typing error, but in the main column it does say 17/18.
Yeah, we see that.
Then for Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak in support of the amendment to defer the cuts to children's centre budgets until the council finally comes up with a sensible plan which addresses the widespread concerns of the thousands of residents who signed the 9 petitions against the council's proposed savage cuts to children's centre budgets and the plans to close 2. A cutting and closing stance Now, where have I heard that before this evening? The stance of the council is that all will be well, trust us, whilst the Labour group concurs with the views of Hillingdon residents who are not convinced by the rhetoric that you can cut almost half of the service budget and all will continue as before, or even better. I could quote from the many emails which I have received, but I will quote from only one. It is from a gentleman involved with Cherry Lane Children's Centre, who has been a pillar of his community for many decades. He takes a very different stance on what the effects will be of this level of cuts. And I quote, "The proposed changes are catastrophic and life-changing for those children and their families who come under our care. You just cannot localise a deprived area such as ours and govern it effectively from afar as the hub and spoke method. The area which is supported by my children's centre has the highest deprivation rate in the borough. It works closely with the school and has the most dedicated staff, all that are vital. Now, as a result of this consultation, which no one appears to understand, with an outcome which has not been fully worked out, and is by the council's own admission not fully costed, it is going to destroy our work." He finally goes on to say, lives could be at stake here. That's what he said. My own ward of West Drayton, which is served in part by Cherry Lane Children's Centre, has 43% of its children living in poverty, and all of the facilities offered in this centre are absolutely vital. I'm not quite sure where the 200k is going to be put, which was mentioned this evening, as it's still a mystery. The 41% budget cuts proposed cannot be called savings, which sounds very reasonable and quite cuddly. They are cuts and should be acknowledged as such. The council's assertion of no cuts is very much being economic with the truth. The Conservative government and this council are tied together with a big blue bow with a label on it called austerity, service reductions, bed blocking, and in Hillingdon it is the youngest and our most vulnerable who will suffer if the cuts proceed. How is that putting young residents first? Think again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor's hands are pouring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the Labour group, we understand the financial pressure we are under because of the regime of austerity that our conservative government insists on pursuing. We welcome genuine savings. However, we already see service level being affected in important areas. This week, the Uxbridge Gazette reports a terrible case of trying to be under the A40. These problems are occurring because we do not have enough enforcement capacity. And what is going to happen to our social care? Obviously, council have no choice but to make the savings. However, the council will be judged on where they choose to make these savings. Is it really right time to spend money on museums and theatres? These projects add a lot to the community and we do not want to defer them indefinitely. But good quality social care also enhance the lives of the residents. It gives a sense of security, connection with the people, and peace of mind for worried families. These are important for quality of life too. Our amendment provided little humanity at the time of deep cuts. I support these amendments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the administration claims that this budget represents significant savings for the council and no services will be affected. I am unable to believe that this is the case. These savings are cuts and they will
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry?
Could you speak up, please?
These savings are cuts and they will certainly have an impact on services. In fact, this is already happening. In resident services, there are over £6 million of savings and cuts. Let me first say that in Labour group, We welcome genuine savings. We welcome the borough-wide LED street lighting program, but whilst we are able to support some of the innovative saving methods in this budget, we feel that others are simply cuts and they will impact on services. In the south of Borough, we are already seeing services affected. There is an increase in fly tipping, which we believe is related to reduction in street cleansing. The streets are generally less clean and tidy, and we are experiencing increased complaints from the residents. In the budget, we also see cuts in ICT, meaning that staff will have less support with the technical aspects of doing their jobs, and cut to administrative staff. We do not know how this will impact on service delivery. Our budget amendment addresses the need for increased enforcement around bed-in sheds and antisocial behavior by providing 2 new enforcement officers. We are also proposing to abolish fees for burial of a child. Mr. Mayor, we urge you to support our amendment in order to protect services for Hillingdon residents. Thank you.
Next one, Councillor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a great concern about the budget put forward by the Conservative administration, because I think it does not provide the basis for the long-term provision of adequate services. Government cuts and the response of Hillingdon is to take the money from social care, because they believe that the government should fund social care. This is avoiding their responsibilities. Their jobs is to provide adequate social care for the dignity of our elderly. Our residents should not suffer because the Hillingdon Conservatives are fighting with their own to the central government. Own party in central government. A long-term strategy is getting, Hillingdon has sufficient amount of reserve money. Many councils are investing their available resources into community projects, regenerating local areas. Why does Hillingdon does not include strategy like this in their budget? Instead, we are expected to believe that we can keep cutting the budget for social care until the government changes its mind. In the meantime, Hillingdon residents suffer. I say, the administration, we need more long-term strategy for the funding of our services. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Allen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hadn't planned to speak tonight, but after listening to Councillor Bianco, I felt I had to. Councillor Bianco, you say you had no help from the Shadow Chancellor. Can I ask what help Hillingdon had from the Chancellor himself?
Councillor Allen, could you please speak to the Mayoralty, please? Thank you.
Sorry, I apologise. Can I ask what help Hillingdon Council has had from the Chancellor himself? Did he give you a call for a friendly chat? Or a sweetheart deal, as was alleged in Surrey? No, perhaps you might ask Boris to have a word. Or is he too busy glad-handling in foreign lands? Too busy to assist? But he's the MP for this area. Surely you have a word with him. Anyway, could you stop taking me? It's my turn, you've had yours.
Councillor Allen, I have to remind you, could you please speak to the Mayor, not make it? Thank you much.
Can you ask them to behave themselves? I've behaved myself tonight. I think I've kept my calm with them, but please, as the Chief Whip, you should know that you should keep quiet as well. Mr. Mayor, it's fairness. Are you proud of your stance on children's services cuts? Or the youth service programme and sessions in Hillingdon, or the lack of elderly care sessions and services? Are we really all in it together? I don't think so. And I have to say, why would our Shadow Chancellor, why would he want to get involved with your government?
A government that's borrowed an eye-watering £7.2 billion in 7 years. 5 times more than a Labour government borrowed in 13. Has it given Hillingdon Council any extra funding? No. It's obvious that you're not May's sweethearts. You're certainly not ours or the residents out there. Please, I'm asking for you to support this amendment because it does make sense. It does cater for what the residents really want. Please start listening. Thank you.
Councillor Oswald, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. My colleagues have already mentioned children's centres. Let me make it absolutely clear that this Labour group disagrees with the proposed closures of children's centres in Hillingdon. Hayes Campus and Hillside provide vital services in their localities and, with the current housing developments and further schemes coming on stream, these centres will prove to be even more valuable to local communities. This Labour group is also against reductions in staff levels, as this will just lengthen the waiting time for places and at the same time could reduce the quality that currently exists. We also believe that children's centres attached to schools operate in such a way that financial losses could be prevented and finances protected. Mr Mayor, local authorities are currently being starved of funding by this absolutely awful Conservative government using austerity measures, not because they have to, but now because they want to. This means that easy targets such as children's centres will suffer. Staff will be reduced, staff that work above and beyond the call of duty. We urge this administration to halt all closures permanently and support the amendment. And also, Mr Mayor, while I'm on my feet, I thought that we reached a loose agreement here that no insults would be passed across the council floor, and Councillor Mills has just called us a joke. Well, I am not a joke, and nor is this Labour group, and I don't want to hear these insults in this council chamber again. And Mr Mayor, I think that we should get an apology from Councillor Mills. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor East.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The government has told us what we will be losing in grants over the 4 years. The leader has talked about needing to make difficult decisions to meet these cuts. However, housing continues to plague us. Having a place to live for you and your family is one of the basic rights of a civilized society. The question for politicians, both local and national, civil servants, local government officers, and everyone with an interest in housing is how we cope with the demand for housing. All our hostels are full, and there are no significant affordable housing schemes coming forward. It is due to a lack of political direction from this Tory government administration. The problem was highlighted by a report from the Resolution Foundation Chair, David Willett, which concluded that 9 out of 10 Britons on modest incomes will be frozen out of home ownership within a decade. The frightening consequence of this is that only the rich will be able to own their own homes. That is a situation that cannot be allowed to develop, and a fresh approach to housing is needed. Mr. Mayor, we feel that those who are vulnerable in our society should be protected, and we call upon the leader to confirm his party support this proposal. Adult social care, Mr. Mayor, is shouldering a staggering over £1 million of cuts. How does this help those in dire need of social care? This council proudly advertised the refurbishment of the RAF bunker and the building of the theatre and museum on the St Andrews site, whilst Hillingdon Hospital continues to be not fit for purpose. Due to lack of political direction from this Tory administration and continuing austerity, these matters are not being dealt with. We are not immune from cuts that have to be made, Mr. Mayor.
in the coming years, but whatever choices are made, we feel that those who are vulnerable should be protected. It is a mark of civilized society how we protect those less well off and who are struggling to make ends meet. We need to explore all options given the severe financial constraints that this Tory government has placed on councils. I wonder, Mr. Mayor, what happened to the saying, an Englishman's home is his castle? Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, having heard at some length about Harrow, Hounslow, Ealing and Swindon, I would just say Surrey 15%. Each year we see the Conservative government reducing local authority funding and savings being made by the council. Although better procurement and more efficient ways of working can result in genuine savings, many of these savings are in fact cuts in the provision of public services. This has affected all areas of council services as budgets are sliced year on year. We have long seen the effects on the supply of public affordable housing and how this has caused a crisis in housing provision for young adults and families, vulnerable adults and disabled people. Another service is adult social care, where the oldest and often most vulnerable residents in our communities are requiring levels of care and accommodation that are not always available except at an unaffordable cost. This contributes to bed blocking in hospital because their homes are unsuitable for them to return to. Now we see proposed cuts falling on children's centres under the guise of more efficient working, but with no evidence that there will be better provision for the youngest members of our communities. The common thread is that all these cuts are affecting the most vulnerable members of our communities, the youngest, the oldest, the most vulnerable and disabled, and those with mental health or other health conditions. As the government is imposing these cuts on local authorities, they should be hearing what effects they are having on people, and it is the responsibility of local government to let the government know this, and when cuts have gone so far that services are damaged to the point of failure. I was encouraged to hear the leader speak on television news recently about funding for adult social care and saying this was a central government responsibility and should be addressed by them. I truly hope the government listens to him and other leaders of local authorities who are sending this message and important feedback. I hope he will speak on the need for additional funding for other services, and local government clearly requires this for essential services if we are not to descend into second world status in some areas. The Labour group is saying we must support the children's centres that carry out such vital work for children and families and reinstate the cuts proposed by the administration. We are also seeking the abolition of burial costs for children and infants in line with some other authorities. This is, after all, a very small sum in the overall budget and one we can afford. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I disagree slightly with Councillor Mills. I'm not going to accuse the Labour group of being a joke. I have to say I do not find anything very amusing at all about this amendment. We've heard strong views expressed about housing, which isn't mentioned. We've heard impassioned pleas. What I am seeing this evening, Mr. Mayor, is a group that has a lot to say, but nothing to offer the residents of this borough. And whilst I do congratulate Councillor Dillon on his putting forward the amendment and his analysis of the economic headwinds that we face as a country, with which I have a lot of sympathy, I must reflect on what the Reverend Davis said at the start of tonight's meeting when she talked about the equitable distribution of the resources that are available. And there has been, of course, a lot of criticism from the party opposite of the way in which we are approaching the efficiency savings around social care and the care of the vulnerable. But of course, That is what we as a council spend the overwhelming majority of our budget on. Adult social care, children's social care, housing services. That is what we do with the money that we raise in taxes and charges and rents. And that, therefore, is inevitably where we must look to achieve some savings, especially when those budgets are so closely pinned to funding that comes from central government and in many cases is being reduced. But addressing the specific points in this amendment around children's services and children's centres. We heard an email which Councillor Sweeting read out. It sounded to me like the Chair of Governors at Cherry Lane School, somebody who's written in quite similar terms to me. And I have to say, when I hear some of those things being advocated, I'm very struck, of course, that none of the Labour members present at the Schools Forum seem to have been raising those concerns when the Chair of Governors at Cherry Lane School was putting forward a 100% cut in the funding provided for the early years centres in the borough, for which additional money has now been made available by this administration in its budget. And we have to reflect, when we look at what our children's centres are there for within this borough, that the purpose of those centres is to support the most vulnerable. We are going to go through a process whereby a Cabinet report outlining the outcomes of the consultation process, which was very extensively debated at the last council meeting, will be available to scrutinise and debate. But at the moment, those centres are reaching 28% of the targeted underrepresented groups, the people that they are there to serve. Only 28% of the users are from the communities that are most in need in this borough. And I make absolutely no apology for saying, when we see information like that, we need, like we did with libraries, have a very good look at how it works.
And now, Councillor Putterford.
Mr Mayor, before Councillor Putterford speaks, I'd just like to remind members this is not your unlimited speaking time because this is on the amendment, not the original motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I will make a more fulsome response when I return to the budget motion. But speaking to the amendment, given that local authorities across the whole of this country are struggling to deal with funding reductions and pressures on services such as adult social care, it is reassuring that the Labour Group know that we have this in hand and that despite their rhetoric, they have not put forward a single proposal or any amendment to our proposals in the budget. With a series of measures including zero-based budgeting and business transformations, we will reduce the cost of running the council next year by 20.5 million, 15.5 million in savings and 5 million from our balances. This amendment proposes to spend £302,000 of the funding prudently set aside for in-year contingency funding and priority growth. The first item relating to children's centres was dealt with at the last council meeting and is covered in comprehensive statements shown on pages 8 and 9 of the council agenda for the benefit of the Brunel students. If you look at the agenda, you'll see full details on that. The council agenda that made particular reference to Harrow reducing the number of children's centres from 16 to 10 and Hounslow from 18 to 5, although a further 5 are to be used as shared centres. Priority growth in this year's budget already contains an additional £200,000 for children's centres and early years centre improvements. As a service, it will be subjected to the same review process as all other services in this council. There will be no holy cows. Every service will go through the transformation process. The second item relating to planning and ASBIT enforcement officers was dealt with in the current year's budget approved last February, when included in priority growth funding of £140,000 for additional posts in planning and environmental enforcement were included. Accordingly, we now have 2 additional enforcement officers in planning and 1 dealing with antisocial behaviour. We are having some success with pursuing offenders under the Proceeds of Crime Act and will be using the awards that we receive under that legislation to invest in enforcement going forward with no additional cost to this council. As Councillor Gillen alluded to in his speech, the difference being that we have to generate the income, we can't rely on somebody to give it to us. As regards abolishing child burial charges for residents, this again was covered in last council meeting, and I would refer council members of the public to page 10 of the agenda where the facts are provided. We understand that this is a Labour Party initiative which seems to have fallen on deaf ears in Harrow, Ealing and Hounslow, where the council is currently charged £1,047, £810 or £1,450 respectively for child burials, compared to £345 in Hillingdon. Absolutely scandalous. They charge we charge only 45% of what Ealing charge, 33% of Harrow, and only 25% Hounslow. If the Hillingdon Labour Group can persuade their socialist colleagues to lower their charges to the same level as ours, it will be an achievement. If they abolish their child burial charges altogether, our policy of being 10% cheaper at all times and all services would see us abolish the charge too. Over to you.
Councillor Kirsty, do you wish to speak? Yes, fine, thank you much. Councillor Bianco is the original mover.
Thank you. I won't be too long. As some of my colleagues have already mentioned, whilst it was interesting to hear from the Labour members, all seem to be speaking from the scripts carefully prepared for them. Most of them barely touched on the subject of their amendments. And it seems extraordinary to me that with a full year to come up with an alternative budget, a full year to come up with a different set of proposals, what have they done? Their amendment seeks to amend our budget in financial terms to the tune of 0.15%. 0.15% of the total budget that I've moved tonight. Now I assume that this means that they support 99.85% of everything that we have proposed. And this must be regarded as a win for us. Now, just two other points I wanted to pick up. One was with regard to social housing. There were complaints that we're not building enough. Well, maybe we are, maybe we're not, but what we are doing is we're building significantly more and have been providing social housing in greater numbers than all our neighbouring Labour boroughs. How is that, I wonder, for such an uncaring Conservative administration? Do they realise, I wonder, that change is necessary and that just because it's different doesn't mean it will be worse? Mr. Mayor, we must reject this amendment and get on with the main business of tonight.
And now it falls on you, Councillor Dillon.
Well, I'm flabbergasted. But I thank you for all your positive comments. Councillor Mills, you're very animated and called us a joke. Obviously, something struck a chord with you, otherwise you don't normally get up anymore to say anything, but I appreciate your response and I'm glad we had an effect. Alternative budget, we're not allowed to produce one, so it always has to be an amendment. I'm the councillor for Hillingdon, we're all councillors for Hillingdon, we support our residents. I'm not bothered about Harrow, Ealing, Hounslow, Spelthorne, or any other Conservative councils. We're all councillors for Hillingdon, so whatever they do is their business. But it's a shame that you feel that you're unable to support what I see as a friendly amendment. Children's services being the most contentious issue, I suppose, but it really shouldn't be. All you're saying is that the cut should be looked at, given proper consultation, which you say you're going to do. And where councils have failed in the past with centralisation of that service, or we have failed to deliver it efficiently in the past. One only has to appreciate the numbers of people who have signed those petitions, voiced their discontent at the petition hearing to Councillor Mills, or made their peaceful protest this Monday to know how residents feel. They're not happy, and it's certainly not this model that will work for those centres, they believe. All I say is there's still time for pragmatism. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes the debate on the amendment, and just for clarification, under the Local Authority Standing Order Regulations 2014, recorded votes are required on any motion or amendment to motion or substantive motion to do with the budget. So we have to go to a recorded vote. I'll be asking members if they're voting in for the amendment as shown on pages 7 and 8, against the amendment, or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Wallana. Councillor Allen. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Burr. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Bowles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chandel. Councillor Chapman. Councillor G. Cooper. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Deere. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dart? Councillor Dart, thank you. Councillor Deducci? Councillor Duncan? Councillor East? Councillor Edwards? Councillor Edgington? Councillor Flynn? Councillor Fife? Councillor Gardner? Councillor Garg? Councillor Gillam? Councillor Graham? Councillor Hagger? Councillor Higgins? Councillor Jackson? Councillor Kaufman? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Catra? Councillor Kashid? Councillor Lavery? Councillor Lewis? Councillor Markham? Councillor D. Mills? Councillor R. Mills? Councillor Money? Councillor Morgan? Councillor Nelson? Councillor O'Brien? Councillor Oswell? Councillor Palmer? Councillor Puddifoot? Councillor Riley? Councillor Sansapuri? Councillor Seaman Digby? Councillor Simmons? Councillor Singh? Councillor Stead? Councillor Sweeting? Councillor White? Councillor Yarrow? Madam Deputy Mayor? Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That amendment is lost 42 votes to 20.
We now go back to the substantive motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only indicator to speak so far is Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In a world that is becoming more polarised by the day, it's imperative that we bring our residents together to share in our very diverse backgrounds in order to make a future of peaceful coexistence based in mutual respect and understanding. One of the main ways we do that in Hillingdon is through our excellent and varied arts and culture programme. Whilst other authorities are closing their libraries, we are proud to have been able to refurbish and well-maintain all 17 of our libraries, filling them with books, computers, CDs, DVDs, and most importantly, people, both our staff who have to be there, but also our residents who use them to learn and be entertained at the same time. Culture Bike grows in popularity year on year, and due to its enormous success, we now have authors actually approaching us wanting to take part. Initiatives such as Love Your Heart Month, coffee mornings, open mic nights, tea dances and chair exercise explain just how creative our staff can be in meeting the needs of our residents of all ages. And this year we plan to build on the enormous achievements of last year of having engaged more young people than any other London borough in the National Summer Reading Challenge. And to ensure more people have access to our library service, we are really excited to be taking delivery at the end of next month of a brand new purpose-built mobile library. Financial efficiencies are also key, and new suppliers of reading materials have been selected to ensure that our libraries not only have access to the latest books, but that we buy them in the most economic and efficient way. We will continue to deliver a number of really popular events, including the Hayes Carnival and the Living Advent at Christmas, which was very popular in its maiden year. And a new arts event is being planned for the summer. I'm delighted to report that Hillingdon's theatres will continue to provide a really varied programme of events throughout the year for both young and old, supporting our many local amateur dramatic and art societies. And the provider for the pantomime at the Compass Theatre has also been selected for the next 3 years to ensure best value in terms of quality of production and financially. We also continue to support the local arts through our financial grants programme. The new visitor centre at the RAF bunker is well underway and will be fully open to the public in early 2018. Investment continues within our leisure centres, with Fusion investing £500,000 in new gym equipment and enhanced facilities at Hillingdon Sports and Leisure Complex. And GLL continue to provide a wide range of activities that support our residents' needs. To see the impact of this Conservative administration's strong financial management, you need to look no further than to the healthy state of the arts and culture in Hillingdon, and just how well it's supported and loved by our residents. Mr. Mayor, I am delighted to support the council tax resolution this evening.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simmons, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take the opportunity just to highlight a few more of the positives contained within the budget for our younger residents, continued demonstration that this council puts them first. Now, I know we heard a gentleman earlier on shouting about no education cuts, but of course, as we see in the budget paper, the school's budget is ring-fenced, passed directly to us by central government. This council has no decision-making remit over it. But in those areas where we are able to exercise responsibilities in respect of children attending schools, particularly in the provision of school places, we continue in this budget to invest in ensuring that every Hillingdon child has a good quality school place. And I think we should applaud the efforts of our school leaders, our school governors, in making those places where great education happens. They are relying upon us to provide a good quality building, and we then hand it over to them to do the rest. And for the most part, contrary to the fake news which I read in a recent Labour newsletter, 87% of our schools continue to be good or outstanding in the Ofsted category following their most recent inspection. Returning to two other things which feature quite strongly in this budget. The first is the future of our youth service, and Hillingdon again stands out by comparison with our neighbours in Hounslow and Ealing and Harrow, in that we have a youth service, and for the most part they don't at all. And having continued to invest, it's my pleasure earlier this week to meet with the National Youth Agency, who I've asked to undertake some work to support Hillingdon in saying, how do we make sure that we get the investment right? We are listening to what our young people are telling us. I'm not sure now that more buildings is what we need. I think it's what we do in those buildings that's going to be important. And we look forward to that independent review providing us with some advice about the way forward. And turning to the issue of agency staff, which I know has been a frequent topic of debate, we need to recognise that what this budget does is recognises the additional cost of agency staff for an estimation of around 10% of staff in children's social care being sourced through agencies. Now, there are times when that is the best way to get access to specialist staff. But we stand out now as a borough where the level of usage of agency staff by children's social care has not just dropped by comparison with our peers, but is amongst the lowest in London. I think that's something where we should give some recognition to our officers for the work that they've done on that, but also recognise that the wider context, the market for children's social care has moved on. And then finally, on the questions around children's centres and early years. Well, Mr Mayor, we are making a decision tonight that makes no assumptions about the future of that service. We know it needs to become more efficient, and as we've done in the past with our music service and our library service, we can implement that and produce a better quality service. I think we should make no apology for ensuring that we have the kind of children's centres that we need that are fit for the future and that are sustainable. And the process that we will go through, as for all other council services, will ensure they are treated fairly and they deliver for our residents.
Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Goodness, 3 minutes to no time at all, but I would like an opportunity to say a little about the areas within my portfolio impacted within the budget and some of the benefits that stem from it. There is, of course, a close interdependency between social care, housing, public health and well-being, and this continues to bring opportunities for us to streamline services in a way which both delivers improvements for our residents as well as efficiencies. And I've spoken before about the part played by supported housing, of which Hillingdon now has 347 units and rising, offering residents with physical and learning disabilities and mental health issues the chance to live more independently in the community. For older people, I'm delighted the Council has begun the development of 146 units of extra care over 2 sites, Parkview Court and Grassy Meadow Court, the latter including a dementia resource centre. Beyond that, there are of course significant cost pressures in social care reflecting wider market conditions on both care providers and the NHS, both of which could impact on social care delivery. Providers seek more funding and need increasing levels of scrutiny to make sure, for us to be assured ourselves that residents are safeguarded. And increased pressure on hospitals result in pressures on social care to support prompt discharges. Now, to manage this process, the business improvement delivery approach has enabled us to review services in order to drive efficiencies and improvements. Now, public health is about helping people to stay healthy for as long as possible, promoting the take-up of physical activity programmes. And this includes the Park Life programme, encouraging residents to get active in our outstanding parks and green spaces in the borough. And the Let's Get Moving programme, in partnership with Sport England, to improve patients' emotional well-being, which has directly led to a drop in GP visits. And of course other areas of service beyond my portfolio also support well-being through our excellent libraries, green spaces, art and adult education. And through public health commissioning, Involving drug and alcohol services and sexual health services, for example, we are procuring new service models that provide better targeted, localised offers that are of high quality and value for money, building in flexibility for future innovation and additional efficiencies. Mr. Mayor, this last year we've helped over 1,000 households to avoid homelessness, preventing costly placements in short-term emergency accommodation. We are also actively purchasing and building more affordable council-owned accommodation for our residents who qualify for help. And more than 200 households have benefited from a grant to adaptations to their property, helping our residents to maintain independent living in their own homes. Mr. Mayor, this budget represents an outstanding achievement against a very challenging financial backdrop for local government. It is a team effort, but I would like to pay tribute to Councillors Puddifoot and Bianco for their leadership in this area, and to the officer team for their ongoing work in driving improvement and efficiency. I support the motion.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking the Conservative administration for consistently providing sound financial management. We will, as a borough, benefit again from excellent services that have become our profile. One of the excellent services that we received from this council last year was the groundbreaking £1.7 million initiative, which was particularly close to my heart, the School Keep Clear scheme. 107 unattended CCTV cameras angled at the yellow zigzag keep clear lanes were switched on at schools across Hillingdon under an initiative designed to monitor motorist behaviour. Highway Code Rule 238 states you must not wait or park or stop to set down and pick up passengers on school entrance markings. Road safety is paramount, and we are lucky to have a well-managed and financially astute Conservative administration which believes in this and backs it. At a time where road safety budgets in other London boroughs have been cut excessively, Hillingdon has set the standard for what can be achieved. I've been a member of the London Road Safety Council since I was elected. It was at that forum that I met other elected members and road safety officers from all the London boroughs, who were astounded that Hillingdon had the funding in place for CCTV school camera scheme and had already implemented it, compared to their boroughs telling them that there wasn't enough money to do even simple road safety training. On the 29th of September last year, the camera scheme was launched at Dr. Triplett's school in Hayes. Cabinet member Keith Burrows was there, along with yourself, Mr. Mayor, the leader and the Olympic rower James Cracknell OBE, who was the president of the London Road Safety Council. Our brilliant road safety officers delivered an assembly on the Green Cross Code, and then a range of pupils took part in scooter safety and pedestrian training, supported by Fred the Penguin, the council's road safety mascot. Not even the persistent rain and the absence of the ward's councillors managed to dampen the proceedings. James Crackler was impressed and said on the day, "Traffic CCTV is a brilliant idea, because with all the local residents and all the people stopping, it's not safe for children to be getting out of cars." Councillor Burrows, who's also passionate about road safety, said at the launch, "We are here to promote the importance of road safety and the initiatives and practical ways that we as a borough can keep our young people safe on their way to and from school. I hope the introduction of these cameras across the borough will become an effective deterrent to help our young people stay safe and prove that, regardless of age, this administration puts all its residents first." In conclusion, representing a Conservative borough that continuously shows exemplary financial management and resources to launch outstanding initiatives like this one makes me feel very proud. That's why I support the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I have one of the widest portfolios, I was going to ask if I could have 3 minutes for each area, but obviously I won't, Mr. Mayor. I won't push my luck. I stand this evening to proudly support this Conservative administration's budget, and as I've already said in my very wide portfolio, Mr. Mayor, we continue to deliver for our residents in a way other councillors can only wish for. Mr. Mayor, we will continue to deliver weekly refuse collections.
we will continue to collect our residents' garden waste and food waste weekly. But more importantly, free, unlike some councils who have started charging its residents to collect such waste. We'll also continue moving forward our investment in our street lighting, as we start the programme of replacing all 23,000 street lamps and 700 concrete columns. Moving to the LEDs, making such an investment for our residents to make sure their roads and streets are even safer. We like that are energy efficient and cost effective. And Mr Mayor, unlike some councils, we will not be turning any of ours off to save money. Now moving to road safety, a subject we have heard, Mr Mayor, I am very passionate about. We will continue to deliver in Hillingdon for all our residents. For example, in the past year alone, more than 1,700 child cycle courses have been completed, and almost 10,000, yes, 10,000 children across this borough have received pedestrian training. A further 2,000 from 5 to 18-year-olds have attended various road safety events as well, all thanks to the monies made available by this administration and the excellent officers we have to deliver what is required. We've heard about our cameras outside schools, and Councillor Mills alluded earlier to the school crossing patrols. Unlike other councils, we will not be cutting them, we are recruiting them, we will keep them. Mr Mayor, as Cabinet Member for Plan and Transportation Recycling, I do hear more petitions from our residents than most of my colleagues. In fact, I've heard to date 44 such petitions, requesting a variety of things from parking schemes, general road safety, traffic calming, road and footway conditions, to name but a few. And because of the sound financial management within this council, I'm able to assist the petitioners in their desire for the council to do something for them. Also, I have responsibility for our lit budget. And within planning, we are making breakthroughs. We are getting quite big of prosecutions. We are using up money to the benefit of our residents. In highways, we continue our investment to improve the carriageways as well as the footways. Last year alone, 99 carriageways and crossovers, 700 crossovers, a great number of footways were all upgraded and maintained, which, from my post bag, Mr Mayor, shows that our residents actually appreciate it. Mr Mayor, I could go on, but time is going.
Thank you very much then.
So I will cease and say I fully support this Conservative administration budget, which continues to put Hillingdon residents first.
Councillor Douglas Mills.
Mr Mayor, I rise to support this budget because not only does it give a council tax freeze for the 9th year, not only does it make sure that our services, as per my colleagues have outlined, continue, which residents expect, but it goes much further. And the areas I want to highlight is our continued town centre programme. In the forthcoming year, there will be more shopfront grants going on in Windsor Street in Uxbridge, in Eastcote and in Ryfield Avenue in Hillingdon East. We have ongoing discussions with the businesses in Uxbridge about how we can improve the area, and it is now only a matter of weeks away before we get the new canopy in Hayes Town Centre, which will replace the old bandstand which has had to be removed to open up the road. So town centre improvements continues to be a real add-on of this administration to the benefit of this borough. But we go even further than that, and my colleague touched upon it in his main speech, and that's our Chrysalis programme, an investment of over £1 million each year into environmental schemes that benefit local areas, whether it be parks, whether it be in the outdoor gyms, or whether it be improving footpaths in certain areas that are falling into disrepair. And I just want to test at the moment the area of support that we give throughout the borough, because not in addition to that we support with mobile CCTV cameras to ensure that we can crack down on those antisocial behaviour. And I'm going to ask all members here, just put your hands up. Who's had an email from the officer team in the last fortnight saying they're going to be getting a new mobile CCTV camera or a Chrysalis programme? Now don't be shy. Come on, Councillor Dillon. Come on, Councillor Allen. Don't be shy. Your rules are included. And if we were seen, the point of that is it's across the whole of the borough. It isn't just in the north. It's the north, the south, the west and the east. We are spending the money for the benefit of all our residents. And that's the point. The fact the Labour group can't acknowledge it, again, speaks volumes about their inability to acknowledge that this administration is serving the residents of this borough and is doing what we've always said, putting our residents first, I will be supporting this budget.
Councillor Richard Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to take this opportunity to speak in support of the budget before us, and the specific item that I wanted to make reference to and focus on is an item that all wards benefit from, and is something that every councillor can have input into, whether they are decision makers, those able to influence decisions, or indeed anyone on the other side of the chamber. The Ward Budget Initiative contains £300,000 that is available to all members across the 22 wards of our borough, and this can be put towards local schemes and ideas. Now, I want to use this time to highlight a couple of examples and ways in which the Ward Budget Initiative has been used in my own ward to help out local groups and organisations. Along with my ward colleagues, we have provided funding to local archery and fencing groups, allowing them to purchase new equipment for their members to use, many of whom are junior members, that's young people, children. Equipment that if the club did not own, some of these people that are involved may not be able to attend or even continue to take part. We've also provided a new refrigerator and water dispenser to a sheltered housing complex, allowing elderly residents to maintain their own level of independence, as well as installing additional bench seating for a park within the ward. Now, in comparison to the large capital projects that have been mentioned in tonight's budget, these initiatives may seem quite small, but what they do allow for is a real connection and engagement between us as councillors with our residents and local groups within our wards. This comes at a time when our neighbouring boroughs are reducing funding that supports both voluntary and private local groups. In contrast, here in Hillingdon, we're out and about in our communities asking these people that run these clubs, how can we help you to continue what it is you are doing? Mr. Mayor, in summary, I'd like to thank the leader and everyone who forms part of this administration for the continuation of this scheme, so that all councillors can ensure that their own wards and their residents continue to benefit. Thank you.
Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We certainly do live in two different worlds. In fact, some of my residents think we live on different planets from the side opposite. My caseload is full of residents who really don't feel like they're being put first by this council. A lot of my residents are not very wealthy and quite vulnerable people, and something that hasn't been mentioned, and it really does need to be mentioned, is that last year, not this 4.99% that Councillor Bianco goes on about and is echoed by the parrots on that side of the chamber, 4.99% is nothing in comparison to what happened last year when they doubled and more the council tax paid by the poorest and most vulnerable in this borough when they changed the council tax reduction scheme, otherwise known as council tax benefit. They have the gall to say zero council tax rise when the poorest and most vulnerable in our borough had to pay double and in some cases triple what they paid the previous year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I speak about the budget, I'd just like to clarify that the person who I quoted was not a chair of governors, but an elderly gentleman who has been lauded by both Labour and Conservative councillors alike as a pillar of his community over many decades. Also, we should not crow at the 87% of children in Hillingdon in schools which are good or outstanding, as quoted by Councillor Simmons, as it still puts us 28th and 29th out of the 32 London boroughs, just third and fourth from the bottom. I would like to say about the budget that it's a hope and a prayer budget. As many of the so-called savings proposed within the budget as a whole would seem to be built on sand rather than actuality. You have only to look at the way so-called savings have morphed from one amount to another in just 2 months. as is shown by the cuts to the social care budget from 1,163,000 reported in December to 2,355,000 which appears in the present budget, a further cut of 1,192,000 which has been found by raiding the unfilled posts budget. One has to ask whether this level of cuts accords with the assertion in the budget report which highlights demand-led growth in adult social care placements. So maybe the council could confirm to the vulnerable elderly Hillingdon residents and their families who may be watching tonight that they will not be subjected to further delays in discharges from hospital due to this council's priorities, policies and procedures as detailed in its 2017 budget with its significant cuts. Thank you.
Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, getting old can be, and usually is, a painful experience.
Indeed.
One is faced with changes to one's physical and mental well-being, having to make long-term decisions about one's future, as well as facing economic problems, such as having to deal with rising living costs on, in many cases, low pensions. It can be a scary time. This budget proves that this Conservative administration, with its two prime policies of having strong financial management and putting residents first, cares deeply for the elderly and wants to do all it can to make our lives easier and better. For the 11th year, we are not faced with an increase in council tax, saving us many hundreds of pounds. If you're over 65, you have an opportunity of getting a free burglar alarm, free emergency buttons for the over 85s, free access to top-notch swimming pools and gyms. This budget shows continuing investment in sports provision, for example, bowling clubs. This budget shows continuing investment in parks, open spaces, libraries, community halls and theatres, all of which encourage physical and mental well-being, for example, walking, cycling, fishing, dancing, reading, singing, acting, playing bridge and Scrabble, and joining discussion groups and special interest groups. This budget shows continuing investment and aid for those voluntary groups and organisations providing support for the elderly. This budget shows no fee increases for the vast majority of council services used by the over 65s. Continuing with the Hillingdon First card that saves us a great deal of money, especially parking fees. Maintaining financial support for the Freedom Pass, unlike other boroughs who are charging residents for this wonderful service. This budget shows continuing investment in adult education services, widely used by elderly folk wishing to enhance their skills and knowledge. Mr. Mayor, there will be problems ahead as we get older. For example, the inevitable pressures on providing health and social care services and rising living costs. However, this budget shows that with strong financial management and the determination to put residents first, this Conservative administration will continue to ensure the best possible services and support for the elderly into the future. Mr. Mayor, if you've got to get old, stay in Hillingdon.
Thank you, Councillor Markham and Councillor Edgington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to raise one particular matter. Firstly, at least the administration has acknowledged the problem about the 3 new young people centres. As you'll be aware, these are being cut. Councillor Bianco will be aware of this.
Please to the Mayor.
The fact is, as noted in the budget report, the number of young people attending the existing centres has reduced dramatically. But this is due to the number of sessions available being much fewer, and indeed many being a mixture of age groups. Add to this the fact that there was no publicity, no presence on the web to indicate what sessions were available. And so it should not come as a surprise that young people have not flooded to the centres. Indeed, the centres were closed more often than they were open.
The cancellation of the Harefield Centre, which was clearly on the wrong site, has cost council taxpayers at least £100,000 in planning and other costs. The weekly number of open sessions at Hillingdon Council-run young people centres has reduced, Mr Mayor, from 29 4 years ago, then to 19, and I checked today, it's just 10. So that, as I work it out, is almost a cut of 75%. I believe that's a cut. I hope Councillor Bianco agrees. It's just a nonsense, an alternative fact, post-truth, to claim that these are not cuts. President Trump and Big Brother would be proud of such a description. Thank you.
Can I please request that it's not across the chamber but through the Mayor, and so the next one is Councillor Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I again wasn't going to speak until I heard Councillor Mills praising himself for the mobile CCTV. Only one problem. Back in 1998, East Avenue had 2 CCTVs. We had drug dealing going on there, fly tipping going on there, and the police, thanks to those CCTVs, dealt with the problem. But then this council decided to make a cut. They closed part of the CCTV room off, denied us access, but also shut down the CCTVs in East Avenue. And the problem came back again. So, of course, I had to start asking, if we can't have our CCTVs working, can we have a mobile, please? And I was told we're on the list. 8 years ago, we were on the list. 5 years ago, I was told we were getting there, and today we're here. So, you're not very smart, Councillor Mills. You should have left the CCTV where it was to start with. Thank you.
Councillor, could you turn your mic off, please? Thank you. And Councillor Pulliford, thank you.
Just to remind members, Councillor Pulliford is now speaking in his capacity as seconding the original motion, so this is unlimited speaking time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like councils around the country, regardless of how or who caused it, we're continuing to deal with the effects of the government's deficit reduction programme. And let me say at the outset that I do not believe the social care precept policy is the right way to deal with the adult social care issue, which should be funded at this time by national government. Either by raising taxes if necessary, or preferably delaying projects like HS2 and dealing with the more important issues that affect local communities across the country now. However, as I said last year, while it's justifiably arguable that local government is suffering to a greater extent than other areas of government, the reality of life is that we have to play the hand that we're dealt with to the best of our ability. We have in Hillingdon seen a reduction in central government funding, which together with the additional service requirements due to the population rising at both ends of the age spectrum and inflation, including salary costs, has required this council to achieve a reduction in running costs of £107 million since 2010. In the coming year, we will need to find a further £20.5 million, and we estimate, based on current information, that a further £62.7 million in cost reduction will be required for the years 2018-19 to 2021-22, which is why we do not prepare annual budgets in isolation, but consider as best possible how we can deal with the challenges that still lay ahead of us through a medium-term financial forecast. Tonight, Mr Mayor, we will freeze council tax for all residents for the 9th year in a row, and it will be the 11th year for residents over 65. And we've already funded the over 65s freeze for the next year as well. And as was the case last year, we will again not levy the social care precept. And it is worth noting, as Councillor Bianco mentioned, considering the value to our residents of that tax freeze over the past 9 or 11 years. Based on a comparison with a resident living in a similar area, where the council over those periods raised tax by either the retail price index or in latter years as allowed by the government, a Hillingdon resident in a Band D property will pay £375 less next year than the resident of that other council, and would over the 9-year period of the freeze have paid £1,735 less. For those over 65, the 11-year freeze, the saving next year will amount to £430, with a cumulative saving over the period of £2,310. Additional annual spending power of £430 for many over 65s living on a fixed income and £375 for many hard-working family households does make a difference, even in Councillor Curling's ward. However, Mr Mayor, setting the council budget is not only about freezing or raising taxes, it is about maintaining service delivery and facilities for our residents. And it is worth noting, and I appreciate that my Cabinet colleagues already mentioned this, that in Hillingdon we have frozen tax whilst maintaining frontline services that many have not. No ifs or buts. Maintaining the weekly free-to-use weekly waste and recycling collection, the continuation of our 17 rebuilt or refurbished libraries, offering a comprehensive library service, including the activity programmes and events for all ages, has effectively turned them into real community hubs. For our residents over 65s, we've heard of the free burglar alarm scheme, free swimming sessions, free allotments, winter heater loans, and a range of supported outings and parties for clubs and associations. Over 80s continue to receive the telecare line service free of charge, which helps them maintain their independence in their own home. Continued investment in our award-winning parks and open spaces. Investment in new schools, museums, theatres, roadway servicing, LED street lighting, new sports facilities and new homes for purchase and rent. Mr Mayor, I said earlier that all councils had suffered reductions in government funding, but how many have dealt with that challenge has differed remarkably from what has occurred in Hillingdon. Whilst those around us have closed down facilities, cut services and charged their residents more for basic services, in Hillingdon we have not done so. In fact, in most cases we've done the reverse, building new facilities and improving services, and at the same time building up financial reserves to help with the challenges that still lay ahead of us. I will come back to reserves later, but for the moment let me talk a little about fees and charges. In Hillingdon, we do not have the stealth tax mentality, charging for green waste collections, etc. And as regards our policy on genuine fees and charges, as well as having amongst the lowest parking charges in London, which for residents are again frozen next year, our residents pay fees and charges on other services at 90% of those paid by residents in our neighbouring boroughs. It's worth mentioning here that as some of our charges have been frozen since 2011, whilst other boroughs have raised theirs, the periodic 90% benchmarking exercise will sometimes give what appears to be a large rise, yet remaining 10% lower than our neighbours. Mr Mayor, I referred earlier to the cuts in funding that we as a council have dealt with and what we anticipate still lies ahead of us. And to help us deal with this in a business-like and structured manner, rather than the reactive slash and burn approach that some councils take, we have built up £53 million in free reserves and balances. And to put this into perspective, in our neighbouring boroughs, Ealing will have £15.5 million, Harrow 10 million and Hounslow 7 million in balances. The position of our housing revenue account is very strong, probably the strongest in London. As well as increased balances, we've also paid down debt, which gives us borrowing ability should we require it. But that would only be done against a proper business case and specific options. It takes strong financial management to achieve what we have done in both the General Fund and the HRA, and we do that all day, every day. We constantly look at ways of delivering services more efficiently, and we do not subscribe to the "we've always done it that way" mantra. Our policy of subjecting every area of service activity to the same discipline as regards business improvement delivery, service transformation and zero-based budgeting is something that I promise the staff of this council would happen without fear or favour. It is our steadfast approach to both financial business management that has set us apart from other councils, and also as an administration apart from the opposition, who year after year continue to demonstrate that they do not understand the abilities and disciplines required to do what we have done and continue to do. Mr Mayor, what we have achieved and continue to achieve in Hillingdon in current economic climate is remarkable, and I would like to thank my Cabinet colleagues, particularly Councillor Bianco, and all members of the Conservative group who in one way or another are making this happen. Could I also thank two officers, the Finance Director Paul Wayman and the Deputy Chief Executive Jean Palmer, who deal so efficiently with the initiatives and inquiries that they receive on a very regular basis relating to financial matters and business delivery improvements. My thanks also go to the staff of this council. We now have some of the best staff in local government who, with very few exceptions, provide excellent services to our residents day in, day out. Mr Mayor, we do not underestimate the financial challenges that we as a council and as a country still have to deal with, and given that today we have experienced the effects of Storm Doris, I'm reminded of the words of the American writer William Arthur Ward,
The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. In Hillingdon, the Conservative administration have a proven record of management and financial ability that is not remotely matched by any other party, and it is this that enables us to continue to put our residents first. Mr Mayor, this is a first-class budget for a first-class borough. I'm delighted to formally second it.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I shall be brief. Mr Mayor, everything I think has been said that needs to be said. I just remind our guests from Brunel that YouTube is available. In case you've nodded off, time is getting on. But what I would say, I think, is I would ask everyone to remember a new number. Earlier I was very keen that you should all remember 4.99%. I think the figure now that everyone should remember is 99.85%, which of course is the degree of acceptance of our budget by the other side. Mr Mayor, it's an excellent budget. Let's vote for it and get on with it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The other speakers have moved to the vote, and it is once again a recorded vote. So I'm asking members to vote for the Cabinet budget recommendation as set out on pages 3 to 6 of the order of paper, against them or to abstain. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Allen. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Burr. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chandel. Councillor Chapman. Councillor G. Cooper. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Deere. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dott. Councillor Delucci. Councillor Duncan. Councillor East. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edgington. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Fife. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gillam. Councillor Graham. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Catra. Councillor Kashid. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Markham. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Money. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Nelson. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Oswell. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Riley. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Stephen Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Singh. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor White. Councillor Yarrow. Madam Deputy Mayor. Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. That vote is carried unanimously.
I only hope I get it right now that we haven't got any other business and we will now close the meeting. Thank you.